Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I am Agi Keramidas and my mission is to inspire you to rise up, grow, stand out and take action towards the next level of your life. I am interviewing leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, exceptional people who can and will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week, every Monday and Thursday. In today's show, I am delighted to speak with Adrian Hales. Adrian, you are a qualified master coach and trainer and an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, master practitioner. You help high achievers to unlock their superhuman abilities, re-awaken their self-confidence and lead their higher purpose. And apart from all that, you are also a fellow podcaster with your show Superhuman Journeys. Adrian, welcome to Personal Development Master. I'm delighted to be speaking with you today.
Thank you very much, Aggie, for having me on the show. And, before this podcast started, we were having a really good conversation and the importance of having things that are really relevant and resonate with people that are looking for more personal development and mastery. So I'm really delighted that that's what this podcast is all about. And those are some of the things that we'll be exploring today. So thank you very much for having me.
It's my pleasure, Adrian. Shall we start with your story or your journey? And in specific, if you could share with us a key defining moment in it.
Yeah, sure. My journey is I grew up in England and went to school, and like everyone does, and I found it quite challenging at the time because I had dyslexia to learn and to achieve what society had deemed the criteria for success at school, passing exams, and obviously a lot of the other kids were talented and they were passing exams, doing well in maths, doing well in English and science. But because I had dyslexia or suffered from dyslexia, I found it very difficult to concentrate. And as we spoke about before, I'm very much a blue sky thinker. I'm very much a visionary. But the school environment wasn't designed for the way I learned best. So what tended to happen to me, like I'm sure a lot of people will resonate with this, when you don't do so well at school, you get one of those supply teachers that sits next to you and kind of tells, they have an additional teaching support. Mm-hmm. But the more I tried to be good at academia, the harder it got for me, until it got to a point where I think I wanted to really express myself, my talents, my gifts and abilities. And that's when I found sport. And that was my outlet. That was my way to express myself. So having that talent repressed at school, and then all of a sudden having an outlet for that was an energy. It was a liberating energy for me. And it was a way for me to be recognized as a young person in the world. And I excelled then at sport. I excelled in athletics, football, rugby, and I was in all the school teams. So anybody that's listening from the podcast, like, sport is such a great way to get that self-expression and get that confidence back. So I left school with no qualifications. I think the biggest qualification that I got was most kicked out of lessons. Because, I was a little bit naughty at school, didn't pay attention, and I got most kicked out of lessons. So I decided to join the British Army. Mm-hmm. And that was at 16. I did lots of peacekeeping around the world. So I did peacekeeping missions. And then I got into the British Army rugby team. Again, that was a side of sport, and I really excelled in that. So I really got the understanding of the sporting mindset and the pushing all you can be and performance. And what happened is I came out of the army and then continued with my rugby career and my sporting career. And I played at a high level, so semi-professional and professional level, at that kind of sporting mindset, which is all about performance. It's all about team. It's all about, finding the finer areas to tune and make yourself better at that specific craft. And one of the defining moments for me, in answer to your question, is I woke up one morning and I I just lost the motivation for something that I've loved for so long. I worked with this psychologist, and he worked on like these ways of, I didn't know back then, but NLP, but anchoring to change your state so that I would kind of fall in love with rugby again. And up until that point, I just lost the drive, lost the motivation, because I discovered something called coaching and using one-to-one coaching to see a change in somebody's mind, behavior, so they would get different results in their life. And then I realized at that point, the defining moment for me was I had to let something go that I loved for so long. And this was when I was about 30, and I was like, I've probably got about 5 more years left of playing, because injury is quite a big thing in rugby, or I sacrifice that one thing and let it go and find my new love and passion and devote myself to that. And that was quite a tough thing for me, because it was part of my identity. It defined my life, sport did. So then I let it go and started on this the journey to becoming a coach. And I'm sure we can go on to a bit more about my journey onto becoming a coach, but that was such a defining moment for me.
When you had that change from being at sports on the rugby, which you wanted to do, but the change towards coaching, and you mentioned the word identity, which I think it's the key word in here, because I have personal experience about shifts like that, and many times it's the identity that holds us and makes the transition difficult. So did you find that change difficult for you? Was it easy because you were going towards your passion, or how did you handle it?
It's a really interesting one, because these rugby environments, they provide a way that you should be, an identity, support from the group.
Yeah.
And when you redefine yourself, very much like a lion in the jungle, now you're vulnerable because you haven't got that support network. You haven't got all those people supporting you. And it can be, a big risk, because now you're out on your own in the world, redefining your identity. So I think in answer to your question, the first couple of years were very challenging mentally, because it's like, who am I now? How do I exist in the world? And how can I then rebuild that? And it actually led me into going to a little island in Spain and pausing my life, because I'd got up to a point where society would deem successful. And I knew at that moment that deep down there was something I needed to do in terms of redefining where I was going in my life. And the only way that we can do that, really, when we look across all the areas of our life, is by pausing, taking time for reflection, deep reflection, and reevaluating your life. So I took myself away for 6 months in an isolated area. It was the middle of winter. There was no one around apart from the locals, drinking coffee, eating sandwiches. And I sat in meditation. I sat in doing self-coaching and applying NLP and different tools to myself, and then re-evaluating my life, working with, and I think you would agree on this as well, working with coaches and working with mentors who can help redefine that for you. Because what I was finding is the more I was trying to redefine it myself, the harder it was getting, the more stuck I was getting. So just by having somebody else to ask me some questions to challenge my perceptions and then redefine that for me was very, very useful at that point.
That's brilliant. And the way you isolated, because when you first said island in Spain, the idea of winter and isolation doesn't come to mind immediately. So it's, you mentioned something about beforehand, what society deemed successful that you did. So what does success mean to you personally?
Success means defining your own criteria for success and living true to that. And if I look at your quote that you put recently on Facebook, it says, train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose, which is by Yoda. And in answer to your other question as well, is that through our lives, we learn, we absorb, different criteria for success. And we will maybe use words like more, better, faster, that's right, that's wrong. And when we unpick some of those words, a lot of them are comparisons to criteria that we don't even know what we're going for. A lot of them are judgments on our lives based on teachers, based on bosses, based on society as a whole, which we live our life through those lens. That becomes our conditioning, our thoughts, our behaviors. And I think you mentioned it earlier, there comes a point when you start to feel that inner conflict, whether that's going to a job that's not right for you anymore, whether that's working in a certain business, creating a business that's not in alignment with your purpose anymore, or in relationships with people that don't serve our highest good, yet we keep on going because of that conditioning, that societal conditioning. And it takes a lot of courage to unpick some of that, because some of it's deeply embedded. But when we can unpick some of that, using coaching, using reading, learning, kind of embodied experiential learning, we start to become aware that those patterns are very fleeting. And behind those conditioned patterns, as Yoda said, the fear, everything train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. Everyone fears to lose this identity that they've created, which is actually the thing that's stopping them from joy, love, self-expression, and following that higher purpose and really stepping into their power. And then once we can define what success means to us and live by that, I think that's real success.
Adrian, if I were to ask you during that period of 6 months of self-reflection, if I were to ask you what's the one shift in your mindset that happened, the most important one, which one would you consider?
One of the most important mindset shifts that happened for me was the power of devoting yourself to meditation and devoting yourself to that self-care back, because everything is energy in the world, right? So everything is an energy flow. And for us to be able to, like we're doing now, is give within this conversation back and forth. We have to be able to have, our water full. And if we're not devoting ourselves daily to the cultivation of our mindset through meditation and through self-reflection, whether that's 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever that is, over time, that can create stuff like self-sabotage, lack of confidence, and because we're not topping our energy levels up, because we've got to have full energy to be able to give. So that was one of the biggest realizations, learning, is just the simplicity of meditating for me.
Fantastic. Yeah. Adrian, let's talk about coaching. So you are a passionate believer in the transformative power of coaching, as you say. So tell us, how would you define coaching in a couple of sentences? And what is it in coaching that can transform people's lives and allow them to change and improve?
So how I define coaching is, imagine for 1 second that your life is this garden. And imagine for 1 second you see the vision of this garden. It has lovely, colourful, like trees, plants in it. It has a garden shed to keep the garden nice and pruned. It has a kind of little waterfall and like plants and green luscious grass growing in. That's the vision of your life, whether your business, whether it be your career, and that's when it's in flourishing. But currently there could be weeds in the garden that's stopping the garden from growing. The shed could be falling down, the water's kind of dried up, and the trees are kind of rotting. What coaching allows you to do is it allows you to pull out all of those weeds, refertilize that mental garden, so that the trees, the grass start flourishing again, just like the vision that you projected at the start. So that's what my definition of coaching is, and it allows you to plant the future that you want to kind of live into, really, and also help you balance your emotions, your thoughts and feelings. So imagine for 1 second that we our life is like a pint of water, and everything, like our thoughts, behaviors, emotions, are in this pint of water, and that causes us having that amount of choice just in that pint limits our self-awareness and our perspective on how our thoughts, feelings and behaviors are impacting us. So it creates that inner conflict. And what coaching is all about is it's about creating more self-awareness and more choice, so that water then becomes a sea of perspective. It becomes a sea of different opportunities, so then we have more choice in our life. So that's how I would define coaching. And what creates that level of transformation, when I'm in the coaching session, if I'm using, for instance, NLP in a coaching session, people have a very fixed model of the world, and it's that way always, and that's what's causing some level of conflict inside. But when we can unpick some of that, like I said earlier about things like I need to be better, faster, this is right, that is wrong, when we can unpick some of those beliefs, those language patterns, it allows us to the client to get a conscious awareness of the deep structure that's going on, that things that are inhibiting them, and it loosens that up so they can see things that weren't in their conscious awareness before. And again, that gives them more choice whether to choose that behavior, that thought, that feeling, if it's appropriate. And when I'm using MBIT, for instance, which is a way you can use your whole system, so it's a somatic coaching using heart, head and gut based on neuroscience, that's again slightly differently, because what we can tap into there is the utilization for the heart, the head and the gut, which gives you 3 perspectives. So what you get with that is what we presuppose is that once we can have 3 perspectives, we'll make better and wiser decisions, rather than just having one decision from our heart, one from our gut, and so on and so forth. And we can look at across leaders of society that maybe lead just with their gut, and the trade of destruction that happens, and people that are all heart-led, which is good to be heart-led, but actually if we're not listening to our gut and our mind as well, and taking it in a whole-bodied, holistic coaching perspective, then that can cause conflict. So it's all about aligning those 3 intelligences, as I said before, to make better, wiser decisions.
I like very much that analogy, what you said about the head, heart, and gut. It's like in my mind comes like the intellect, the emotions, and the spirit. So, however that is defined, I will speak about that in a moment. But because we're still talking about coaching, you say that you help high achievers to unlock their superhuman abilities. That's how you call it. So tell me, how do you mean it superhuman, and why, if people have these abilities, what keeps them locked? What's locking them?
That's a good question, Aggie. So superhuman abilities really is it's the analogy from when I was at school. I had talents, gifts and abilities that weren't recognized because of fear at school of getting it right, getting it wrong, and not being able to express myself. But superhuman really is to recognize that all human beings have superhuman talents, gifts, and abilities. That if they can, like a flower, if they can unfold and flourish and bring to the world, it will benefit not just their lives, but the lives of other people. So it's not necessarily going around with a cape, although we would all probably love to be Superman or Wonder Woman. But it's about recognizing our uniqueness. And there's something Aggie does, which is truly unique to you that no one else can do in the world. And there's something that I do that's truly unique that no one else can do. It's about finding out what that is and then gifting that to the world, because that's when we're in our flow. That's when we are at our best. And one of the biggest things I've noticed that stops people from doing that, and amongst the things like fears, inner conflict, limiting beliefs about themselves, which they maybe self-sabotage and procrastination, along with all those the things that we know people come to coaching for.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing is I've seen is people going to careers and jobs, and like you said earlier about that inner conflict when your values are not aligned, yet they keep on turning up every single day. They get treated a certain way which is not aligned with their values, but they keep on turning up every single day. And it's the trade-off between all economics and authenticity. So it's about, I'll trade off and be on 150, 200 grand a year, but deep down, it's not my higher purpose. It's not my higher calling. And I'm going to settle for this life, which is okay. But when it becomes a problem is when people deep down know that they've got this gift to bring to the world, this project, this creating this tribe, even becoming a coach or a podcast host, yet they don't do it. And I think the biggest thing that stops people is the fear of going into uncertainty, because as we know, doing what we do is that you have to be able to deal with going into uncertainty. Yes, it's bloody scary at sometimes going into that uncertainty and following authenticity rather than just economics all the time, because that's where the opportunity is.
It's one of my favorite quotes of all time is by Tim Ferriss, who said most people would choose unhappiness over uncertainty, and it's exactly what you mean. And it's a shame, really, but it is the truth. And you mentioned that many people are aware at maybe a deeper level, maybe not very consciously, but they are aware that there is something else that they could be doing, or maybe they want to be doing.
Yeah.
And the way you phrased it earlier, the word purpose came to mind. So I wanted to ask you about purpose. Anything you want to discuss about purpose, really? How do you think of that term? In what sense? Is it like physical? Is it spiritual? And how can that be cultivated and expressed?
Yeah, so purpose, I look at it as in every single person has got a reason that they're here, like a unique talent or gift to bring to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And really our life's purpose is, what we are born to do. And how I discovered that was, you spoke about Ikigai, which is something I have used to find out the purpose, and coaching came through. But there's things like numerology to find out your purpose. There's things like archetypes to find out your purpose. There's things like gene keys, which is a way of embracing your higher purpose, of finding out really what's going on in the inside in terms of your emotions, in terms of your skills, your strengths, and then work out and map out actually what your purpose is. But sometimes I do a bit of a test with coaching clients sometimes, because when you say to people, what's your purpose, or what, because when we look at purpose, it's really about the work that fulfills you, right? It's really about what gives your sense of self a sense of joy and a sense of bliss that you could quite happily do for the rest of your life. You spoke about how much you love podcasting, and it shows with the level of detail that you go into the podcast of really finding out some really great information to pass on to the listeners. So that shows. So we know when we're on purpose, and I always say to people, if you had 5 seconds to decide what you'd spend the rest of your life doing, what is it? And then I go 5, 4, and then boom, people come out with it straight away. And I think what stops people finding that purpose is taking too long to think about it. We all know what that is, as you said before. What would ultimately fulfill you, give you the biggest sense of joy and add value to other people's lives that you could quite happily do for the rest of your life and feel in flow when doing it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, write it down. And that's probably one of the best ways I've found to find out your purpose.
You see me nodding now because I've had my own journey of self-exploration and trying to figure out the purpose. And even though now I can 100% understand what you say, on not just intellectually, I know it. But I remember myself not so long ago, a few years ago, when finding the purpose, in quotation marks, was I made it like my purpose to find my purpose. I had this kind of quest, which approached from all different angles, and that thing you said about the 5 seconds to decide. I remember once I had a coaching call with someone, and he used the phrase, "So if I put a gun against your head, you have to decide right now. What will you do? Tell me."
Yeah.
So that really forced me to focus and give a decision and avoid the trap that I can decide tomorrow. I can do this thing that I don't like doing for another year, or until the kids go to university, or until I have X amount in the bank, or we keep postponing, but tomorrow never comes. That's the big trap.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right there. It's like, oh, it's okay, and I'll go back on that tube, or I'll go back on that bus and keep on going.
Yeah.
And that never somehow fulfills us. But what corporate companies tend to do is they tend to create these environments where we think, oh wow, they're really looking after us. They give us free almond milk. They give us ping pong to play in the PlayStation and stuff like that. But ultimately, corporate companies find it, they can dress it up as much as they like with, like, we've got all these staff benefits, but ultimately it is about paying back shareholders. And I think there's a delusion or an illusion around that this job provides us with job security. I think Jim Carrey, my friend was talking about this thing that Jim Carrey said, is that his dad got a safe job as an accountant and dedicated himself as an accountant for many years because he was providing for the family. But he was a fantastic comedian, probably as good as Jim Carrey, made everyone laugh. But instead of going to this other town and following his dreams to be a comedian, he stayed in his current town and took a safe job. Mm-hmm. In 10 years' time, he lost that job, and his world come crashing down. And Jim Carrey says this wonderful quote. He says, "You can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love." And I love that quote. And also one of the other quotes, which was really around, you speak about, we know our purpose and we get a real sense of, like, we feel it when we talk about it. It's like an energy that connects throughout our whole body. Mm-hmm. And Jim Carrey says this other quote. It says, "When we create ourselves to make it, we can either let that creation go and take a chance on being loved or hated for who you really are, or you're going to have to kill who you really are and fall into your grave grasping onto a character that you never were." That's such a very simple quote, quite deep, but it awakens the mind a little bit.
It is deep, and brings to mind other things, like the living a life that is not authentic just in order to avoid judgment from others, and all these limitations that we have. Actually, let me ask you about these limiting beliefs and things like that, which I'm sure you help people overcome. What intrigued me when I read some kind of description you had somewhere about the limiting beliefs, the fears, you use the word demons in the same sentence, which I want your explanation. Explain that to me. How are they demons? Basically, I agree with you, but I want
Yeah.
your point of view.
Yeah. So the demons, that was the perspective around the kind of our shadow self. And it's those deep kind of unconscious fears that are embedded throughout our lives, really. So I looked at those kind of shadow aspects, because whenever we go to level up our lives, whenever we go to progress on our dreams, our goals, our plans, it's not always met without resistance, right? And that resistance does come from other people, where they, try and pull you down a little bit. But then that little voice in the background, the little kind of the shadow self, I would call it. So would just start saying, you're not going to be able to do that. It's you're not good enough. You'll fail at that. So it's kind of that plays in the background. And if we allow that to dictate our behavior, if we allow that to sabotage our progress, then we'll never get to the place we want to in life. And it's not saying that that's not part of us, but it's accepting that as part of us and viewing it objectively rather than becoming it. So I think once we can become aware of those patterns, that shadow self, and as we spoke about those inner demons, once we can become aware of those subjectively and find out actually they're not really there to kind of to destroy us and hurt us, then we can progress. Because as I said before, the definition of coaching is to give ourselves more awareness and more choice, and it's just working with those shadow aspects, so that we can progress and we can keep going. So I'll give you an example. I was about to do my podcast, and it was a great idea, and getting that Superhuman journeys out there. And then in the psyche, the collective unconscious, or things I've learned in the past from others, was like, well, what happens if everybody judges you? What happens if it goes nowhere? What happens if, you get no engagement? What happens if, you put it out there and no one listens to it? So you get all these kind of these fears that come up. And I suppose the aspect that I'm kind of getting at is there's nothing more important than true liberation when you realize that you're not the voice in your head. Whereas people, once they identify with that shadow or that fear, they become it. But when we can view it objectively from a subject-object view, then it's a liberating, because you're in control of it rather than it being in control of you. And I'd like to talk about a quote from Dr. Strange, where the Ancient One says to Dr. Strange is that we never lose our demons, we just learn to live above them.
That's beautiful.
That's what it is.
Beautiful.
That's what it is for me. Yeah. And when I was doing my MBIT trainer, because I'm obviously qualified to train people in MBIT as coaches, one of the trainers said something to me which was so profound in a moment, which was, when we can look in the eye of the tiger and not get bitten, that's when we've transcended above it.
Facing the fear head on.
Yeah.
That's the only way to overcome it.
Yeah, and just noticing it. And that a lot of people, they go through coaching, or they go to move towards more of what they want in their lives, and they feel fear. But feeling fear means that you are going in a direction or the right direction. So because otherwise you wouldn't feel it if you were just sat on the sofa not thinking about changing. So
that's great. That I agree completely with you. And you mentioned you said it, the shadow self. I call that the inner villain. So somehow we have to accept that it's there and find ways to maybe not silence it. Maybe that's not the right word, but to act despite that limiting, fearful voice that looks after really our survival and not about our growth and happiness. It's all about trying to find anything that might be wrong. And there are plenty of things that could be wrong. What you said about your podcast and those questions, which are, I'm sure that everyone can relate to having this self-limiting thoughts. What if this? What if that? And unfortunately, many people allow these voices, which is nothing but thought energy, allow them to hold them back and not do what they really want to do, which it's a big, uh, very big step. You said about realizing that you are not a voice in your head. Can you tell me, Adrian, how much has meditation helped you to get to this realization?
Yeah, I think meditation's definitely helped me. Meditating outside and sitting in your own awareness and your own thoughts has definitely helped me view things more objectively, because when you're meditating, you're in control of that process.
Mhm.
And I went to a meditation group. There's lots of different meditation groups around the country, but I intentionally went to one, and it really helped me learning. From Thich Nhat Hanh. It was a part of his collective, and it was about, we were doing walking meditation, chanting meditation, and
Mhm.
silent meditation. And obviously, I've done a lot of guided meditation, but the ones that really helped me were chanting meditation, because that stimulates the energy levels in the body, stimulates the chakras, and that's really useful. And also, silent meditation has helped me, because by the very definition of silent meditation, you're having to be aware of that little that little villain, the little demon that's kind of that's going around, and then you can view it for what it is, and and just contemplate and become aware of it. And then what starts to happen is, what I really learned in meditation is, you become aware of some of these unconscious patterns, because you're allowing them to flow, and accepting them rather than letting them define you. So it's very useful to learn that. And there's lots of different apps which I use. One called Omvana, which is a great app. And then there's also, in the UK, there's something called Insights Meditation, which is, I think it's a big group in London who teach that. So I'd say it's been really helpful. And if you look at across all the different people that have been, elite, successful people, a lot of people validate it, and there's been lots of research around the benefits of meditation. But what about yourself? Is it something that you've learned as well? Is it something that you've got an interest in the meditation?
Absolutely, absolutely. Lately, I've been using Sam Harris app myself, which is incredible. I've used other apps in the past, Headspace, Calm, etc. The Omvana you mentioned, I've tried it a few times. Now I'm doing the Sam Harris, and I'm getting some very different realizations that I had, and certainly helps to be more present. I think that's the word I wanted to use. But be more present in every situation where your shadow self, or your the voice in your head, will try to distract you and take you away from what you are doing, and point you towards the past or the future. So some worry, some regret, whatever it is that will take you away from what's happening right now. And I think for me, that is the what I've gained. And it's not like I'm there, or I've reached that state, but it's an ongoing journey. But I enjoy the process, and I see the benefits, if you will,
Yeah.
with meditation. Apart from all these kinds of benefits, is there a link, do you think, between meditation and the spirit, the spirituality, or are they completely different?
Yeah, there's definitely a link, I would say, through spirituality, because and you once you start to settle in,
Mhm.
if we look at life from an MBIT perspective, our gut in MBIT, one of the core competencies of the gut is core identity, who you are, being in the world, courage, security, your needs and what you're moved by most. And from the heart perspective, it's, your desire, how you relate to the world, how you relate to yourself. And then you've got the autonomic nervous system, which is also around your sixth sense and your being. So once you get into that meditation, what you find is the gut settles down a little bit. When we're very anxious in life, we get mixed messages from the gut. But when we settle down in meditation, when it allows to settle, you get lots of metaphorical kind of communications, like symbols, like metaphors, like colors, like some thoughts that come up, and that a lot of that communication comes from our gut area. So my belief is our spirit is kind of kept in the solar plexus, kind of between the heart and the gut. And yeah, it's very much around spirituality, around balancing our energy levels. And if I look at some of the talks I've been around kind of oneness or non-duality, noticing that everything is kind of connected. When we're identified with who we are in the world, the identity that we've created, that's sometimes where our inner conflict comes from. In answer to your question, when we can sit in meditation, come behind that inner conflict and get back to our true essence of who we are, that is connecting back to spirit. And that's how I found you can do that, along with chanting meditation as well. And also, as we spoke about previously, expressing our purpose or our joy or our love for anything, because when we're in flow, that's when we're expressing from spirit, I think.
You mentioned the term spirituality. What does that term mean to you?
Spirituality for me, just recognizing that everything's connected. We are a spiritual being having a physical experience, not the other way around. And that we are thinking, emotional, spiritual beings, and we're creating a holistic view to our life when we're able to devote ourselves to all those different areas of our life, not just economics and setting goals and those types of things, when we can actually recognize that we are an emotional, spiritual thinking being, and we can satisfy those different levels of our personality, psyche, within our life from a holistic point of view. That's really important, because I get a deep sense that's when we're at our best, when we're satisfying all of those from an emotional, spiritual, and feeling and thinking level.
That's fantastic. Adrian, let's talk about something different. Let's talk about your podcast, actually, the Superhuman Journey. So what made you start a podcast?
I realized that I enjoy and I really love talking and expressing. So I was looking at ways of, how do I get my gift out there to the world, which is wanting to express and communicate, and how do I add value to other people? Because I was finding that, writing long texts and long posts, it wasn't really playing into my strengths. So the motivation or the intention to start the podcast was, number one, is finding something which falls into my business strategy, where I'm able to be my best and something I enjoy, and then also how to add value to other people's lives. And I was speaking to my coach around, there's lots of type of how-to podcasts out there, but there wasn't that many of finding out like what we're doing about somebody's story. So really it was about bringing out people's inspiring stories so other people could imagine themselves in those stories, because as we know, stories is one of the best way to influence people to change and to support and help them, because we can see ourselves in the characters of those stories. So one of the big things my granddad taught me when I was younger is, telling stories and making up kind of mythological stories. And it's something I really resonate with when I was a kid. So I was like, right, I'll create a kind of journeys and stories type podcast. And then I just thought about there's lots of people, whether they be coaches, whether they be directors, whether they be business owners, who deep down feel called to do meaningful, inspiring work and follow their truest path, higher calling, awaken to that higher calling, yet they're not doing it because of fear, lack of self-confidence. They're kind of hiding in the shadows a little bit. So wouldn't it be great to create a podcast which would enable them to get some inspiration so they could start unfolding that journey or that story for themselves? And also, I've partnered with a charity called Transitions, who look after disadvantaged kids. So as we start to build the podcast and monetize it, there'll be a small percentage of that money from the monetization that goes back to support project groups in schools around, disadvantaged kids who need some support to progress their lives in the right direction. So that's what it's all about as well. And getting people that have had a very human journey, just like me and you, are normal humans, but something changed for them and they went on to achieve the extraordinary, because I believe that's within us all.
I believe so too. I like the word extraordinary. It's one of my favorite words.
What does it mean to you?
Extraordinary is related to the best of our abilities, the most we can do, our higher self. Something that is way beyond our just physical form. It's in more, layers or spheres of. It's a great word. Adrian, let me ask you some quick fire questions as well. All right. Okay. I see you're getting hot there, so I have to...
favorite food. Well, I've got a flat up here, but I didn't turn on the fan on because I didn't want to disrupt the audio.
Okay. So, what does personal development mean to you?
Personal development means to me is evolving our skills, evolving our abilities, and pursuing mastery along with our purpose, so we can become more efficient, better at what we do, and help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what personal development means to me.
And let's say you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self. What's the one piece of advice you would give him?
I would say learn coaching, learn NLP, learn MBIT now, and learn how to do a podcast now. Rather than waiting another 20 years on top of that.
Would be nice, but I don't think it works like that, does it? We have to go through the journey or our hero's journey. I know you like the analogy, and we can't just skip to the end.
I'd say also, I think as an 18-year-old, I'll probably say everything's going to be okay.
Awesome. If you had a magic wand and you could change something in the world today, what would you change?
Stop war. Stop, kind of war in countries and destructions and killing of life. I think that's a big one. Even coming from a military background when I was younger, but I suppose as a soldier, I was never really concerned about. It sounds paradoxical about going to war. It was more about kind of peacekeeping and supporting people who had been affected by war. But I think definitely to stop war.
Do you want to share with us a major breakthrough that you had over the last year or so?
Yeah, I think it's actually been quite recently, to be honest. Really, one of the biggest aha moments was, I think in business, we get very concerned about what people want us to be, or how we should fit people into our business and do our ideal client and all this type of work. And a big aha moment was something I shared with you earlier, actually. It was only recently I've had that, was about stepping into our power and stepping into our truth and expressing that, and the right people will be attracted. Because I think when we are in business, we look for inspiration from other people. We look at the 7 steps, the 8 steps to do something. This system does that, that system does that. And then we end up like kind of overwhelmed and like can't see the wood for the trees. So when I was recently speaking to someone, they were saying, you know, stand in your truth, and then the right people will come to you. And that was from a realization of learning out my archetype. So years I've always been the kind of warrior type archetype, but that wasn't working for me in my business and my purpose anymore. So my archetype is more lean towards the magician archetype, creating transformation. So it was an interesting one, because it was almost like going back to that moment when I stopped playing rugby and I was like, right, this is coaching. And it was kind of like I need to let go that part of myself, which is more the warrior. It's not saying don't use it, but using the magician archetype more so around transformation and stepping into that and letting the other one go. So I would say that's quite a big transformation.
It's a great realization. Thanks for sharing that. Do you want to also share a big mistake that you've done over the last year so we can avoid making the same one?
Yeah, sure. I think some of the mistakes that we do make is that we don't really step into our full power, because that's a scary prospect, right? To really stepping into our full power, and how do we embody that? So how do we really embody that, and how do we live and breathe that every single day? And even though I'd been successful, I've worked with lots of coaching clients, started a podcast, done lots of different workshops and courses, I knew deep down, even though I was doing that, I wasn't fully stepping into my power. So I would say that I capitalized on opportunities in terms of time, but also I probably wasted a little bit of time as well by not fully expressing and stepping into that power and doing more speaking gigs, doing more podcasts, doing more live videos, and doing more of what makes me really, really happy. So I would say that a mistake, I would say, is waiting too long to get out there and express that magician type archetype. But that's a big realization that I've had recently, actually, is just really step into that and do more of what you love.
That's great. Adrian, is there anything you were hoping I'd asked you today and completely skipped it?
Was there anything that you were going to ask
that you were hoping that I would ask you, that you wanted me to ask you, and I missed it completely?
Yeah, I think it would be good. I suppose just around creating like a holistic view to life. That's something I'm quite passionate about, but we spoke about so much, and not necessarily something you've missed, but something great to talk about. I think would just be creating a holistic point of view for your life.
Tell me about it. I want because some things you were saying about the MBIT earlier, and it gave me that impression of the holistic, which is something that I believe more and more things around us will be holistic, and that's how it should be, really. But do you want to expand on this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think we are converters of energy. So we have energy full, and that enables us an output. So the reason that we experience inner conflict, stress, or we don't progress because of we're overwhelmed with maybe fear or being anxious, is because our bucket is not full, our energy bucket's not full. So by having a holistic view to our life, that we can maintain and our energy levels and maintain that bucket. So our mental well-being, our emotional well-being is balanced. Mm-hmm. So obviously we spoke about some of the things that we can do for that is making sure that we have a morning routine set up. So whatever that is for you, my morning routine's around cold shower, meditation, and then set up for the day, maybe workout. So a holistic view is looking at all the different facets of your personality in your life and making sure that you build that into your weekly blocks and time box. So morning routine, meditation, making sure you're looking after your health and fitness, having good nutrition, making sure you're doing work that fulfills you and you enjoy, But if you're not doing that, making sure that you're expressing a talent, a gift, whether that's painting, whether that's music, and building your life around all of those different aspects, because that maintains your energy level and having time for switching off and reflection and connecting with other people. So I would say that's like a holistic view of life and performance.
That's fantastic. How can people find out more about you, Adrian?
Yeah, so if people connect through my Facebook and LinkedIn and through and Googling Superhuman Journeys podcast. At the moment, my website's getting rebuilt, but people can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or through Google searching for Superhuman Journeys.
I want to thank you very much. This has been an intriguing conversation, and I want to wish you the very best with your life, your business, and the podcast, because I know firsthand that it takes, and I was telling you that before we started recording, the kind of dedication it needs to make a podcast stand, because it's not for the short term. It's something that it's for the long term. So thank you very much for your time. Any parting words?
Yeah, no, just I think this is a great podcast that really explores some of the questions that people want to hear about personal development. So Aggie, I thank you very much for asking some good questions, and I think it's got a wonderful pace in the podcast as well, and it's become a very natural conversation. Parting words are, if you're going on this journey of redirecting, redefining your life, it's most important to just be gentle with yourself as well, and to realize that once you're going on this path, you will experience different types of emotions, like joy, like love, like elation, sometimes fear, sometimes in a conflict. And the most important thing I would say is get a coach, get somebody that can support you through that journey, but most of all, be gentle with yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Adrian.
Thank you, Aggie.
Thank you for listening. Please take a moment to subscribe and review Personal Development Mastery on Apple Podcasts, and also share this podcast with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to gain access to exclusive content while supporting this podcast, then become my patron. The link is in the show notes, or you can type bit.ly/pdmpat. If you want to know more about what I do and how I can help you, or if you have any questions, join my Facebook group Personal Development Mastery. Again, the link is in the show notes, or you can simply type bit.ly/pdmgroup. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in.